This presentation is going to talk about Webform Accessibility. I am Jake Rockwitz, known as Jay Rockwitz on the web. I'm a Drupal developer and software architect. I built and maintain the Webform module for Drupal 8. So let's start talking about just accessibility. And I pulled this definition from Wikipedia because it's a good starting point. Accessibility refers to the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people who experience disabilities. The concept of accessible design and practice of accessible development ensures both direct access and indirect access, meaning compatibility with a person's assistive technology, for example, a screen reader. I think it's important in this definition to distinguish between direct and indirect access. And direct access would just mean being able to tab through a form or having good contrast, color contrast. It's unassisted. They don't need tools to do that. It just improves the accessibility of your site and your forms. Indirect access generally would be screen readers or tools that people use to navigate your site or understand it. And screen readers we'll get into in a little bit. And a little about me and accessibility. I know accessibility is important. I chose to ignore it for years. I really have never tested a website I built for accessibility. It's something I didn't feel was important, and I now feel I have a responsibility to address it with maintaining the Webform module because lots of people are using it. I'm also seeing that it's just important that we all start thinking about it more. Now, the big takeaway as I go through this is we don't have to be accessibility experts. We just need to care about accessibility. We need to put some effort into it and be aware of it. And I'll get into it more as we go through. But so also, there are other presentations at Design for Drupal where I'm going to do this talk, and there are more information online, but you should go to one of these presentations if you're Design for Drupal. And, I also want to call out, these are the experts. Mike Gifford and Andrew McPherson are the accessibility topic maintainers in the Drupal community. They do an amazing job working all different aspects of Drupal to make sure that our tools are built in ways that people with disabilities can use it, and they're very approachable and they're always available to answer questions. I've worked with both of them in different capacities, and I really wanted to give them a shout out for what they've done in Drupal 8. And these are the starting points for accessibility in Drupal. There's a main page, there's a Drupal 8 page, and I'm also maintaining a Webform Accessibility page where the slideshow might go and other materials as they develop. If there's materials that I read over time, I'm going to post it there. And while we're going through this presentation, think about what is your story? Why do you care about accessibility? What's your organization's legal obligation? And how do you want to address accessibility? So to step back, I want to just do an introduction to the Webform module, just to lay the land. The Webform module is a powerful and flexible open source form builder and submission manager for Drupal 8. My elevator pitch is it provides all the features expected from an enterprise proprietary form builder combined with the flexibility and openness of Drupal. And this is a web form. It's a simple contact form that ships with the module. And this is the web form builder, the backend used to build and manage your forms. And I really just want to touch upon the use case, which is very simple. It's just you build a form, publish the form, collect the submissions, send out emails. You review these results online, and then you might distribute these results as a CSV, or you even remote post them to a CRM. It's even as simple as these 3 steps. You're building a form, you're collecting the data, and you're distributing the data. And I like to do an elevator pitch to get people all on the same page, and it's a default install, and here's that contact form we're talking about. For this demo, I like adding a company field. This is my elevator pitch demo also. I'm going to hit Add Element. I'm going to go to Text Field. It's going to fill out company, which I've done millions of times. And I'm going to hit Save. I'm not going to go heavily into all the settings around this. I just want to show you kind of how it works. What's the UI, UX? Here's company. I want to move it to the top under your name and make it required, and go over back to the build. And I like showing the source because it really is a very powerful feature, especially for developers. You can go in and edit the source code behind the form. And I'm going to change it to your company, and even show that you can cut and paste properties. I'm going to hit Save. And quickly I'm going to show you it adds the element. Even for this demo, I like to add just an advanced feature just to show you there's a ton of capabilities here. I'm adding a multi-column flex box, so it allows you to lay things out side by side. So if I drag this up here and move your name and your company, I'm going to get them left and right. And I'll just show it to you, and company is now to your right. And I've also jumped to the test tab, which just allows you to fill out the form with Latin text quickly. And hit send message, and we get this little message at the top, very simple. I'm going to click back. So we have done everything on the front end that happens with a form. Someone gets to a form, they fill it out, they get a confirmation. Now we can look at the back end, and the emails have been sent out, but we can look at the results. You have a lot of advanced features where you can star, lock, add notes to it, and just want to show you the results. You can even review the results as a table, plain text, read the raw data, and jump back up and go all the way to, now if you wanted to distribute and download them, you can pull them down as a CSV. That's a pretty much quick pitch of the Webform module. I'm going to jump back, and the big takeaway from this demo is I want to just discuss, like we talked about, you have forms which people fill out with elements. Have this horizontal line to distinguish, like we're building forms for people to consume, so we have to think about those people and their disabilities. And then there is the form builder and the source editor and configuration and settings. And we do want to pay attention to the accessibility of these internal tools. Drupal cares about accessibility on all levels. But for this presentation's purpose, my focus is on the forms we're serving to our users. First, you want to deal with that. That's your clients. Those are the people who come to your site. And gradually over time, we also want to deal with the admin UI experience. And now let's just do an accessibility introduction. And to start off, there are lots of useful tips and tools available to help find and debug accessibility issues. We can start off with evaluation tools. These are little extensions that you can add to your browser that just help you test your pages. Lighthouse and Wave are the ones that I kind of recommend, but there's a huge list available by the WC3. And I can do a demo of this, and we'll use this form. I'm going to start off with Wave because Wave is a little simpler. It just runs through. It actually starts tagging and labeling all your accessibility features. It looks at your area tags, which are giving metadata about where your site header is. And then when you get to the form, it shows you your labels and whether it's required, and it gives you errors. There are no errors on this form because this is pretty much a default form that's out of the box using all of Drupal's accessibility features, which are really good. I would throw out there, accessibility issues happen in Drupal when we start customizing, and the web form has a lot of custom features, and that's where I've started to introduce accessibility issues that I want to address and talk about. Now I'm going to switch back, I'm going to hit refresh, and I also want to show Lighthouse. So Lighthouse to me is an amazing tool because the ironic thing is there's a little button here, but this is all built into Chrome. When you go into the developer toolbar section, the developer console, it's all there. All these features are there. We just didn't know it, or I didn't know it for a long time. And this extension just makes it possible to click a button. It does more than accessibility. It checks your whole site. For our purposes, I'm going to run the accessibility because it's faster. So if I run it, you will see when I hit generate, this browser is going to resize and check mobile and see how it works for accessibility. And it gives it 100% score. And what's also great about these when you really get into it is you can look at the audit and understand what to think about. And you read through these, and these are practical, real life things. Headers don't skip levels. I like that one. So your header 1, 2, 3, 4 all match up. And then you start learning these things to pay attention to when you're building sites. Now scroll to the top and keep going. So now we're going to switch into screen readers. And Mac OS X includes VoiceOver. There's an open source Windows screen reader. Chromevox is kind of available for all platforms. It's not as robust, but I kind of like calling it out because it's the only one that's like open source available as a Chrome extension to every operating system. And I'm going to give you a demo of it. I'm going to stick to this form. And on OS X, it's F5. And a funny thing while I was preparing for this is I learned I had to turn off the entire audio on my computer because it was reading all of this out loud and just dominating the presentation. And I'll throw out there, try to read this as it's going out in your head and think about what it's saying. And what I'm going to just be honest with you is you get into a field that says your name required, edit text main 1 item. Chrome has new window. Now if you hit submit, it says please fill out. You go in, required invalid data, you're currently on a text field, enter the text field. So I'm navigating through, I use the tab. Let's see if we can get any other things to happen. There's a lot of features here. Honestly, my take on this was I found screen readers to be very overwhelming. They're indispensable. They're helping people navigate through, but using them is really hard. There's a lot going on. You have to get used to it. And I'm going to talk about screen readers a little bit more because screen readers can feel overwhelming. And we're going to get into it because I'll show you one of the nuances. So once again, I really want to emphasize this, and we even have to turn this guy off. VoiceOver off. everyone needs to be aware of accessibility, but not everyone can be an accessibility expert. You don't have to be a screen reader expert. Um, and there are these guidelines. These are the expert guidelines. They're as unbelievably thorough and detailed, and you should look at them. And I even wanted to pull out one of the, principles of them. And I kind of want to throw out there, like, I want to show you something with accessibility. This is even overwhelming. Personally, when I read this, I was like, perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, information user. These are all terms that none of us are used to with the web. And, like, we don't discuss pages this way. And something's off here. I'm going to be honest. Or that's my personal take. It overwhelmed me when I started reading these guidelines and principles. And I really conclude guidelines can be overwhelming. And you need to be aware of them. We have experts that are aware of them. The tools that we're using that I showed you respect these guidelines. But you got to come up with an approach. And I actually had to step back and think about my approach when I was doing this presentation. I simplified it to be the three things I want to pay attention to with accessibility is navigation, information, interaction. And what's interesting about navigation is that's not so important because as long as people can tab to your elements, they're going to figure out how to get to them. If you structure your pages correctly, the tools will help. There's one massive navigation issue with accessibility, and that's slide out flying menus are really impossible for screen readers to read, and that's a huge challenge that people are facing. It's actually not a big challenge for web forms because we're not doing that. But what really is important, that's why I have the dotted line here, because I think what you want to really think about a lot, because navigate, you don't have to know how to navigate a screen reader perfectly. You just need to know, okay, if I tab in, it's going to read this information. If I have an error, it'll read this information. There's an unbelievable number of shortcuts that you don't need to know. But when you get there, you got to think about the information. What's being exposed visually and through metadata? Are you giving the user enough information about the input that they're trying to fill out? And then the real tricky one is when they start interacting with things, what happens? Even a very simple HTML element is like a data element where there's a slide out calendar. And those sometimes are browser-based. HTML5 supports it. And there are accessibility issues, challenges to get that to work and recognized. And so let's really get into approaching web form accessibility, because I'm trying to give you some tools to start there. And, I really want to approach the Webform module and just tell you, the Webform module for Drupal 8 is featureful. It's got a ton of features. It's just how I feel about it. It needs to be competitive. And while I was adding features, I really kept saying to myself, open source is a collaborative and iterative process. So if I added a feature that was incomplete, it'll get improved. People will work on it. Sometimes I just want to get the idea out there so people are thinking about it. And accessibility, I'm going to be honest, is always a secondary step. It's okay. You're going to have the idea first and you're going to build it. And then you want to think about the accessibility. But you need to make accessibility part of that process, of your process, your creative process, your building process, your checklist. You want to think about it. And there's some great resources for form accessibility online. I actually use this first one, Form Concepts from the WC3, heavily because it's so thorough. It goes into everything. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and the other two resources are very similar. They're great resources to think about when you think about form building, like forms and building them and testing them. And to kind of get a starting point with this, I kind of set myself on a mission of building some examples of accessibility for the web form module. There's now a dedicated web form examples accessibility module, and it ships with these 4 forms that provide basic element examples, advanced, containers, and multi-step. And as we're going through this, I want to emphasize some accessibility improvements are to be determined. Some things I haven't gotten around to fixing, and I will. And improving accessibility is just an ongoing iterative process in the Drupal community, in the web form module, on your sites. It should be too. So let's just look at these examples. I'm going to use them while we're talking. And I'm going to go up, and we have this advanced example, but I'll just show you the basic. Very basic form. I did add some tools that come with it, and one of them is just toggling required and not required and disabling client-side validation. And I could even just show you I've required everything, I have disabled client-side validation, and now if I hit submit, you're going to get a preview of it. And I also did, I'm going to jump back to the top, I have this little show accessibility, which will just highlight certain things, and we'll get into it, but I'm highlighting field sets. I'm not even going to go into the other examples because I'll get to them as we're talking. So Let's review these form concepts that the WC3 is kind of talking about, and labels. So provide labels to identify all form controls, including text fields, checkboxes, radio buttons, and drop-down menus. The web form requires labels and titles for all your elements, period. You can't not have a label and title. You can hide it. This is getting into a developer thing. If you're a developer building forms in Drupal, always include a title. I kind of calling this out because I have made this mistake heavily, and I'm paying for it because it's a huge accessibility issue. Even if you need to have the title just hidden. And just a little note that is important is, you can have placeholders, which are little pieces of text inside a form element. That does not replace a title. Screen readers recognize it differently, and they have different behaviors. So, labeling elements. Let's do the demo. Sorry to jump ahead. I'm going to go back to the basic one. So the idea is this is the label, and the little HTML thing is the label has a an ID. It's associated with this text field. So when a screen reader comes in, it'll read, this is a form element, and then even look at the other metadata that it's required. There are other labels included in the Webform module with descriptions and more, and this helps hide and show long strings of text, which maybe your users don't always need. I'm trying to offer all the features possible so you can think about it. There's a help button icon. It has some accessibility, but it actually does need to be reviewed. If you toggle through, it will get read out loud because it's using a title tag and read that text. Keep going because you'll see that it gets more and more complex as we move through. So grouping related form controls makes forms more understandable for all users as related controls are easier to identify. Basically, if you have a bunch of form elements that are supposed to work together, class example, an address, they should be grouped together. And grouping is usually done in field sets. Drupal wraps checkboxes and radio buttons in field sets. The web form is wrapping options with other elements in field sets like select other or checkboxes and other. A little note is, beware of nested field sets. That gets confusing because you're kind of nesting your groupings. Consider using the section or details element. And something to be determined that I'm still working on, I probably have to do this, is wrap my composites, which is a group of like an address, in a field set. And I'll demo them. And now this is worth jumping up to the advanced example. Well, actually, I'm going to jump. Sorry to jump around. I'm going to jump to the basic and turn on show accessibility. This is grouping. It's a field set that's hidden around these radio buttons, and screen readers read the field set and said, this is a group of elements, and it really helps the screen reader know and the person know that they're working with these specific elements in here. If I jump back up to the advanced example, I am going to turn on the show accessibility because it makes it a little easier, is buttons. These are multiple buttons working together. I'm wrapping them. These select other widgets do have two elements. And I do want to, so we're talking about labels before. So the blue is showing us the labels. This is an accessibility mistake that I made. The select menu here, even though you're seeing the label up here, I want to be clear. This select other is associated with the group. This drop down has no label. Screen readers don't know what to say when it gets there. It just starts reading it and it doesn't really help someone. So it's something that has to be fixed, but you start getting the idea. And then we get into these other elements. There's advanced widgets, which what I like about this is I'm giving you a preview of other things we're going to talk about. There's also, this is another to be determined, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, is this is an address element. All of these elements are associated together to create an address. It is not being wrapped in a field set, and they should. Anytime, I think the rule really is that anytime you have more than one element working together, they should be wrapped in a field set because it helps identify it. Now, I did talk about containers, and I just want to give you a preview of the containers that are available. So we talked about field sets. You can create your own custom containers with field sets. Avoid nested field sets, so be aware of it. This is the details element to hide or show. There's also support for the HTML5 section element, and it just gives you a header. And keep in mind, if you're a designer, you could style this section element. It even includes a wrapper any way you want. You could even get it to look like the field set above. I also want to call it the message element while we're talking, and it's just a message element. It's a container where you can put messages. You can even put fields within it. So let's keep going. So validation. In addition to providing instructions, validate user input to help users avoid mistakes. I mean, we all agree validation is important. And this is where screen readers get really tricky. It's like HTML5 validation varies from browser to browser and screen reader to screen reader. So the spec on setting up HTML5, that means client-side validation. I'll even show it to you. There's a spec. Here's how we set it up, but how browsers are using it, and especially how screen readers are reading it, is all up in the air. The one that troubles me the most is I have seen screen readers, the example being you have a text field that's required. It hasn't been filled out, and you navigate to it the first time, and the screen reader reads your name, invalid data required. And basically they haven't done anything, and it's telling them they've done something that's invalid and it's required. It's a pretty overwhelming experience when you think about it. I think people get used to it, but when I saw that, I was like, wow, that is an unusable experience. I still think screen readers and HTML5 validation are important. I think I'm getting here. By the way, that's like the last point in this slide. Generally, the recommendation is disable HTML5 validation. And I'll show it to you. It's client-side validation. Use inline form errors module included in core. It has really good accessibility. And it's worth noting custom errors can make a difference. It's okay if you have a text field and you say, this text field's required. But if you have a text field that has a special regex pattern, it shouldn't say invalid data. It should say you need to enter a full email address or something like that. And I don't want us to give up on HTML5 validation. I think the browsers can come around and improve it. So I actually think I personally like leaving HTML5 validation on in the admin UI because I don't have a large audience or harder, more strict accessibility requirements. So let's talk about validating input. I'm going to use the basic one because it'll be really a little quicker. So that's why I have these tools. I can just turn on. I do have the inline form errors module turned on, but I'll show you something that's going to happen. When I hit submit, this is HTML5 validation. And I mean, you could even see there's that little bug here. It's off screen. It's not catching it right. It says this, please fill out this element. Now it has a title. It's a tricky one on how it's doing it. So what I have is this tool. And by the way, I'm going to just quickly check this box, but you can disable client-side validation for your forms or globally through configuration. I even demoed it at DrupalCon. So I've disabled it. Everything's required. I have to just walk through this. Everything's required. And now if I hit submit, we're going to get a preview of the form errors. So at the top, it reads 19 errors have been found, and it has quick jump to links to each element. And it has this error message, which is fully marked up correct. I'm not going to inspect it, but it gives the screen reader proper information about the error. This is the best form validation accessibility we have in the Drupal community right now, and it's very powerful. I'm going to keep going. So notifications and messages, which is similar to validation because at the top that was a message. So provide feedback to users about the results of their form submission, whether successful or not, the not being invalid. And think about it. The more information you provide, the easier it is for users to understand what is happening. Confirmation page is the simplest approach to forms. That means someone fills out the form, they hit submit, and it goes to a new page. It's the simplest approach because one, the new page only contains the confirmation information. You're not reloading the form and having stuff at the top. Something I'm going to show you because I need input on. I've been thinking about it. Well, first off, I have closable messages, which you can do inline messages. What's the best, most successful way to allow someone to close a message? What's the toggle button? What's the label? And should confirmation messages be announced? And I'm going to do a little quick demo. So we're going to jump back up, and I'll jump to the container one. The close thing is just this. This is an inline message which is supported, and it closes. I actually have an accessibility issue in there, which I'm even going to get to in a minute. That close button doesn't say anything. It's just I think it says close. What is it closing? Is it closing this box or that box? And these are little nuances when you're building these custom elements you need to pay attention to and figure out the best approach. One example with toggles is you don't want to use hyperlinks, you want to use buttons. Screen readers read buttons more directly. They look at links as hyperlinks going to pages. With the notification stuff I want to talk about, and this one is really nuanced because it's hinting at something very interesting. This is the previous submission, but if I hit send, well, let me do a test. This has a confirmation message. My gut says that screen readers should be reading this out loud. It should announce it, which I'll show you the feature in a second, but your message has been sent. That to me seems like the best user experience. Keep in mind, when we say screen readers, that means normal users would just read the message. But if you had a screen reader enabled, it would announce your message has been sent. That is the most responsive feedback you can give someone, a notification. Drupal is not doing this out of the box, so it's something I have to really think about for the Webform module. But I think in the case of forms, we have that very specific use case. You fill it out, you get a message. Sometimes you hit a form to just save configuration. I don't know if that needs to be announced every time. So we keep going. Some multi-step forms. So where possible, divide long forms into multiple smaller forms that can constitute a series of logical steps or stages. This helps make long forms less daunting and easier to understand, particularly for people who are less experienced using computers or various cognitive disabilities. I think this helps everyone. The less is more. The simpler your form, the better it is. The simpler you can break down your form, the better it is and quicker it is to fill it out. You'll have a lower drop-off rate. Forms with 20 elements versus 10 elements, the one with 10 elements will always be completed more frequently. It's just a simple fact of forms. Now, yeah, a multi-step form makes a long, complex form simpler. And the Webform module has full support for multi-step. It has a progress indicator, which uses an external library, but it's pretty decent accessibility, so it tells people how they're going through. And this is a big one. Multi-step forms support cross-page conditionals. And the example, and I'm going to bring it up again and again, it's like, if you ask who are you on the first step, you can really improve the user experience. Because if you know, let's say you're doing an appointment form, because I do that with my client in the hospital. We make an appointment. Well, we have 3 audience members. We have a patient, a caregiver, and a doctor. Patients need the least amount of information because that's the person that's the person filling out the form, that's the person we need the information. Caregiver, you need a step of, well, who's the caregiver? We ask the question, who are you? And we can simplify the form. If it's multi-step, you can even take full pages out. And when I was referring to referring physician, the referring physician is an incredibly long form because you're asking medical information, the doctor's credentials, the caregiver. Now, I wanted to demo multi-step to kind of show you the Webform support for it. Go over here. So here's the form. You can click through. I actually don't have any required fields, but you can tab through. I'm going to actually show you in the builder. And by the way, there's this little helpful thing. This is actually pretty helpful for everyone. It makes sure people don't lose their information as they're navigating away from a form. And this is also just a behavior that you can turn on. And for cross-page conditionals, this means you're going to a page and you're saying, well, this is page conditionals. You can, on this page, I can say hide or show this based on the gender if you wanted to ask specific questions. And you could say, value is male or female. Cross-page conditionals would be on this next page. I can hide and show different elements based on values from the previous page. It's a really useful thing to explore. I personally am moving in this direction with forms, as wizards, if they're done right, can make the user experience a lot cleaner and simpler. So now we're getting into custom controls. And sometimes form designs require something beyond what's achievable with standard form controls. And custom controls can solve some really difficult problems, but they can also make a form inaccessible. And like something I hinted at, like toggle and close buttons need to say what's being closed. Elements like, a lot of JavaScript elements that will place, like the classic one is like the select menu doesn't work great when you're doing multiple value selection. So there's a select to library, you do it, and it has a beautiful UX I'm actually using in the Webform module. But some of them make the mistake of completely hiding that original select menu, which breaks, screen readers aren't aware of it, it breaks validation. HTML5 validation just breaks because it's hidden. So you want to pay attention to that. And keyboard accessibility is really important when you're building these elements if you're overriding the default behavior. So with custom controls and external libraries, so the Webform module relies on external libraries for almost all custom controls. Most of them are just JavaScript and CSS. Some of these libraries do have accessibility issues. In a lot of cases, I wanted the functionality, I wanted the right, simplest approach, aware, once again, that open source is collaborative. And if there's issues, we can fix them in the external libraries. And the other thing that's really fundamental to the Webform module is all of this can be disabled. All these external libraries and elements, you can turn them off and not have them. I recommend let's put this way, it ships with 80 elements. No site needs 80 elements. You should go through, even if you don't have accessibility requirements, and turn off some elements. If you don't need file uploads, don't enable them. So we're going to explore some custom controls. That's where the advanced example kicks in nicely. So we go over to advanced. So this is the select 2 kicking in. It has okay accessibility. This image select, which is a really, really important, people are using it, has clear accessibility issues. The 2 on my list is the tab key doesn't work and the arrow keys don't work. So screen readers just don't have any knowledge or way to use it and navigate back and forth. At the same time, I chose this library because it was very simple. It's easy to customize. It's easy to gradually fix. It's even easy to overlay accessibility to it and get the tab keys working. The Likert element, actually, if I do show accessibility, it has really nice accessibility because, oh, it's not kicking in there. There's all these hidden labels around these radio buttons that will help make it more accessible. I'll get that working, I promise. And this is a select other. These are advanced. Now we're going to get into, these are all things you want to pay attention to, and we need a signature element. This actually, for someone with heavy disabilities could be an issue. And you might have to think of a different approach or an alternative approach. And then there's also support for multiples. There are issues here. You know what? I'm going to show you real mistakes. I think that's worth it. Now that we're getting into custom controls, and I'm going to show you lessons learned. So I'm going to turn on Wave. I'm getting some errors because I deserve them. Missing labels, and we'll start seeing where I made those mistakes. Well, by the way, this shows you that there's labels hidden under here. That example I brought up before, this is how I figured out that I made this mistake that I need to fix. The other one that's killer, well, this table select sort is missing. This is core without a weight. I want to throw that out there. Core is not saying that this is a weight field. I'm pretty sure, you know what? I might have made that mistake. I take it back. I got to give Core credit. They didn't make that mistake. It's a funny thing to admit. There's another mistake. So this is a number to add more items. It doesn't have a label, more items, so no one knows when they get to it with a screen or how it works. I hope this really shows you the power of these accessibility evaluation tools and what it can do for your site. The classic one I see all the time is people have search boxes without labels associated with it. And let's think about it. Someone with a disability, search has got to be the most important feature for them to get to your site. Because maybe they can't navigate. Maybe the navigation doesn't work, but they're looking for, I have an appointment with a doctor, which I go back to hospitals. They go find the search and say, I need Dr. Blah, and it goes to the page and they figure it out. And if that text input doesn't have the label that says, enter your information to search, whatever, enter keywords, search, they can't find it. And if it's not, by the way, if it's not an HTML5 search box, you're also limiting it. I'm digressing into a lot of nuances here, but I hope that just gives you a hint of what, when you're dealing with custom controls, the things you need to pay attention to. Keep going. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk about some Drupal concepts, because there's some really cool stuff in Drupal and the Webform module. So Conditional Logic. The Webform module ships with Conditional Logic, which is Drupal's states API. It adds JavaScript to change the state of an element based on another element. It's like hide show logic. If you check off this box, you might want to show some additional fields. The select other element is an example of states where you have, a select menu and you select other, and that changes the state of this hidden text field that slides out and says, would you like to enter other information? And this is an interesting, and I should mark this to be determined. I don't think Core's going to change this, but Conditional Logic, very important, doesn't notify users when the page has changed. I mean, we're visually showing it, but for someone with a visual disability, they're not going to see it. It does make the note that if you do it at the top, when someone starts filling out a form, and you change something below, it'll be fine because they'll tab through to it. Hiding unneeded elements will make it easier for someone to fill out a form. That's the huge benefit of Conditional Logic. Instead of like optional fields, if you don't need that information and you just hide it, it just makes it easier for people to get through it. And once again, this great thing is like, who are you? You figure out how to get that right question the first time. And keep in mind, when I say who are you, it's just asking the control question in the beginning of the form. It could be, who are you? How can I help you? What are you looking for? And that can change the whole form user experience and get it more focused and more specific. So with Conditional Logic, I actually think I touched upon it enough where the demo would just say, when you go to an element, let's Here, use the contact form. You go to any element and say email address. If you don't need their email address, you click Edit, Conditionals, and set up the logic on whether it's required, disabled, read-only, anything. Generally with accessibility, hiding and showing is the key thing. Taking them out of the flow can make a really big difference for a user. So this is a great feature. This is something I had hinted at because we talked about that message. When you hit confirmation, you hit contact us and it displays a message at the top, your message has been sent. We should announce it. That's what I think. And there's this feature in Drupal called Drupal Announced. It's a JavaScript API and provides a way to express to a screen reader changes to the state of a page, toolbar, settings tray, and any element. And Core is using it a little bit. It's actually something everyone needs to start being aware of and using. And I'm starting to think like of all the different places you could help. Because if you're going to do an AJAX callback where you're going to add more, you should say added one more field, added two more fields. And some notes about it. It tells users when the state of the page or element has changed. It's just a useful accessibility improvement. And like I'm wondering, like, should we be announcing our AJAX callbacks when changes happen to content? I can give you a demo of it. It's an interesting demo. It took me a while to find it because it's not being 100% used in Core. But if I go over here, now I got to enable my screen reader. Okay, block. So I'm going to read it to you because it's really overwhelming when it starts reading. Add custom block. If I start typing and I type web form, enter part, you're currently typing a text field. Give it a sec. Oh. 3 blocks are available in the modified list. That is custom code that is talking to the user. By the way, you saw all that gibberish running around? This is the most useful information that just happened. I'm smiling because it makes a point. That key little tweak that someone went into Core and made is the most accessible thing that just happened in this user experience. And if you go in here and now you say enter blocked, and by the way, these directions you're to enter this field, enter a part of the block name to filter by. That is custom code, a title hidden. And if I go in and I put the word page, 2 blocks are available. You got to think about how powerful this is and think about how much easier it makes someone to use the site if you're giving them direct cues, call outs. I'm really going to heavily explore this feature, and I hope that in Core and everywhere people start using it. It's very hard because you have to have a screen reader to understand what's going to happen with it. I'm going to even make another argument about it in a little bit. So we're getting to the end. Oh, look, it's even telling me slides 70 or 79. So let's exit out of this. Getting involved with accessibility. So get involved with accessibility. The first thing is you got to care. Pay attention to accessibility when building pages and forms. Create an accessibility checklist. That's really the direction I'm going in. Is I'm going to have a little notes file in the Webform module of things I pay attention to when adding new features or reviewing things. And then the next part is really advocating this. That's what I'm doing right now. Is you got to push your team to define the accessibility standards for your project. And I want to emphasize, once you do that, you got to just get everyone on the same page and be very agile about it and continually review and revise your accessibility standards. And this ultimate thing in Drupal is contribute. Find and fix accessibility problems. Create a ticket, write, and review a patch. Accessibility issues are always welcome in the Webform module. Frankly, they're usually very easy to fix. They're almost always easy to fix. The only ones that get me is the third-party libraries because I'm not going to go into some external JavaScript library and start fixing it. But if there's labels missing or certain behaviors not happening, it's easy. It's just caring. So you can get involved with accessibility. There's a group on Drupal.org. There's a Slack channel that's very active. And with every Drupal person, you can just get involved in Drupal. If you're not, if you're just starting out, accessibility might not be your cup of tea. And there's a main page, the contribute page on Drupal.org, where you can see different ways to get involved. So with the Webform module, there's always the issue queue. That's definitely where you can file your accessibility issues. There's some Slack channels. This is the primary Slack channel. And I like to call it Drupal Answers because I'm definitely answering questions. So if you don't have an issue, but there's general questions, I'm there, and there's a lot of great people who chime in and weigh in. And Drupal Answers is not just for Webform. Webform has a certain tag. A lot of aspects of Drupal you can get good feedback for. And like this presentation's resulted in me creating this meta ticket for improving web form accessibility. And I've started with this documentation page and that examples module, and I'm working through these, which is, creating a checklist, reviewing the current accessibility, documenting what core, form API issues I find in the web form specific issues, and to remediate these issues. And that's the ticket. And, I mean, by the way, this gives you an example of what your checklist should be. And by the way, the checklist needs to be, labels, pay attention, field sets, announce, what screen readers are we reviewing, what's our target, what guidelines are we using. So I want to end with, a little bit, what's the future of accessibility? Well, all information needs to be accessible. This is the only thing that's certain about the future of technology. That's really what's inspired me here is like, I found a lot of this overwhelming. Screen readers, I hate to end with, they're really hard to use. I think that's going to change dramatically in the next 5 to 10 years, like insanely, because right now they're just reading the page and kind of figuring it out. But as other technologies develop, I think accessibility is going to get a boost from it. As self-driving cars and AI develop, that technology is going to come back to these screen readers, and suddenly they're going to become incredibly usable. And what's going to happen, and this is really fascinating to think about with forms, is we're going to build a form in HTML, and that's going to be read on Alexa. It's that whole process. That form is going to be converted into a talk-oriented system. And if we can improve our accessibility now, by the way, if we just get used to it now, we're going to be ahead of the game as things evolve. And yeah, making your information more accessible just makes your website more usable. So, are we done yet? Yes. Ralph says yes. If you have questions, you can definitely reach me on the Drupal Slack channel. You can post your issues. You can go to my presentation and ask questions, and that would be great. I hope you enjoyed this. Take care.